Welcome to the Season 3 of the India Energy Hour podcast. The India Energy Hour podcast explores the most pressing hurdles and promising opportunities of India's energy transition through in-depth discussion on policies, financial markets, social movements, and science. The podcast is hosted by energy transition researcher and author Dr. Sandeep Pai and senior energy and climate journalist Shreya Jay. The show is produced by multimedia journalist Tejas Dayananda Sagar. Under Move for Earth initiative, co-founder of SwitchON Foundation Vinay Jaju cycled over 3,000 kilometers across different states in East India, connecting with farmers, women, and youth to address clean air, sustainable agriculture, and renewable energy. Vinay Jaju is also the founder of ONergy and ONskills. He has worked with various ministries of Government of India and bilateral organizations such as US Embassy, General Electric, and World Wildlife Fund. He is currently the managing director of SwitchON Foundation and looks after the daily operations of the organization.
Vinay, welcome to the India Energy Hour podcast. I am so delighted. I have been wanting to have you on the podcast for so long. I remember last year when we were, spending time together in Kolkata, I wanted to have you, but one thing or the other happened and we just couldn't make that happen. But when I started looking at your LinkedIn post about your cycle ride, and I was like, okay, let him come back to where he's going and I'll talk about your cycle ride and then I will invite you. So I'm so glad you could join. You're fresh from the field in terms of talking to real people on the ground about climate action. So really welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Sandeep bhai. It's a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, great. So we have a tradition in this podcast that we start with the person itself and their story. And so, take your time and explain to us where you were born, what's your personal story, how did you become an entrepreneur, and what's your kind of future thinking in this area?
So I come from a traditional Marwari family, born in Jaipur, and Marwari family's family business we have inherited from sort of generation to generation. With the typical sort of aspirations that I want to travel the world, do an MBA, get a nice job at an MNC, which took me to Australia after doing a management program in Bombay. I was working there for a year. That's when I got involved with climate action almost as a environmentalist, started to get involved with local groups there. This was in 2007. Around that time, I was like, what, as a young man, you start looking for what your purpose in life is and what are you here for. And I found my calling in environment. I found my love in environment. I wanted to come back to Kolkata and start an organization which can take the message out to young people to do something about this challenge. That brought me back to India. Ekta, who's my wife, we got together to start SwitchON Foundation, set up as an NGO, which was and Ekta comes from a Gujarati family. So it was a big move for us. Our families were just not happy about this. And, but then we committed to do this. We started the organization. And at the same time, I was also pretty sure that I wanted to work in the space of energy as an entrepreneur and solar. Again, climate change was not very much talked about or very little talked about in 2008 in India. Solar was not in the horizon. It was like, oh, it's a technology of the future and when it will come and what will happen, who knows. But we knew this needed to happen. And that's how it started. And it started with a cycle ride. And I'm talking about another cycle ride that we're doing in 15 years from now.
So let's start double clicking on all the different themes you touched about. What were some of the main challenges kind of in 2007, 8 Like climate is very different in 2023 in India. Like there's a lot of energy, people are doing courses, there's MBAs, there's like grad school, and people come up with lots of global understanding and Indian understanding on climate change. It's a very hot and upcoming topic, whether it's a scholar, it's an entrepreneur. I mean, 2008, like I had no idea about climate, right? I personally didn't know, I didn't think about it. Like, how did you start convincing people, like when you started meeting bureaucrats or, anyone, like how do you even start that process? Like, what were the administrative challenges? What were the, it's also difficult to get people, motivated people to work on those topics. Tell us in a bit of detail about how you started that process.
So it became pretty clear. I mean, the science was very clear even in 2008. At least the scientists were extremely convinced that we are heading into a crisis. It was an emergency situation. And I started to read about it. It was very clear to me, just as a normal person, that yeah, this is a problem. But of course, in India, that had not caught on. Even people who were environmentalists were not talking about climate change, or even organizations that were working on environment, they were hardly talking about climate change. We went to young people because that's what we felt that I was only 27 at that time, so I could connect with them. I was like, no, these are people that need to know. And I saw a lot of young people, I connected with a bunch of young people in Australia who were committed to climate change, and I was like, yeah, we need to build a movement. It was again a small movement in Australia, but we need to build a movement in India with young people talking about this. It also connected me to a few young people in India working on climate change. They were again mostly folks from outside who had studied from outside and had roots in India, were coming back and wanted to talk about it. Talking about administrative challenges, what I started focusing on was knowing environment, knowing climate change. Energy was the biggest contributor. And in India, what was unique was we were already dependent on oil, and all of our electricity production was going to be based around coal. And I was trying to understand, why are we even going that path? And because these developed countries have gone that path and now trying to reverse and talk about renewable energy. So why shouldn't we just make that switch to renewable energy? It was a very, very naive question back then. And I started to understand and started to study about, why are we going that path of fossil fuel, the development path of fossil fuel, when it was very clear that India, even though it seemed to have a lot of coal, but how much of that coal was even available and how much should we even be using? So I started to question that, started going to talk to experts, went to talk to bureaucrats. And I mean, some were completely rejecting the idea that this is not a problem for India to think about. India has enough coal and India will grow that path. Some said, don't worry, India being India, these targets are there, but none of these targets would be met. But there was hardly any conversation around renewable energy because it was just so expensive. And back then, and people kept saying that renewable energy is not going to happen. There was absolutely no idea of what the timelines could potentially look like. And we were like, yeah, let's make it happen. Right from there, 2008, 2009, my brother joined me and we started ONergy Solar, which focused on last mile energy access for rural communities, because we saw a market there, because it was still dependent. There was a lot of houses still unelectrified. We could see a market there for renewable energy to come in. Back then was the solar LED lights we started to promote. And so interesting days, and there's a lot that has happened, like you said, since then with solar or climate awareness. Yeah, there's a lot that's happened.
Okay. Just one more aspect. You said that you did your first cycle ride and then that kind of, sparked your, creation of Switch On and then later ONergy with your brother. Talk to me about like your 2008 journey. Like, where did you go? What did you who did you meet? What was the message? What did you hear from them?
So it was a very simple ride back then. I loved cycling and I wanted to cycle and sort of talk about climate change then. And because we were so focused on energy and renewable energy, I was just going with a simple question that, why is India looking to go the path of fossil fuel development when we could use the path of renewable energy. So just as a youngster with that simple question, I started this cycle ride with another friend of mine who came from the Netherlands to help us set up Switch On. He was there for a few months and he was happy to join me on the ride. So just the two of us, we just went off with no plan. We were like, yeah, we'll sleep wherever we want to sleep. We'll sleep. We literally ended up, we thought we'll sleep in these small hotels, but then we figured that if we eat at a dhaba or roadside eatery, we can sleep there for free. So we started doing that after 1 or 2 nights. And it was just fun. We were just riding around and we would stop in some key cities. We would go talk to a few key people there, talk to the media with this question of ours, and just wanted people to know that, this climate change is real. It is coming and we need to think about it. And also, why should we think about fossil fuel, both to the government and also to individual consumers? I remember going into Delhi and setting up a press conference, and no one came for that press conference. It was an empty room. We got good coverage, and we rode through the coal belt of India. So we went to Jharia, we went to all of these places, rode through, trying to capture the tough life of coal miners and what it is to create this energy that I was, as a privileged person, had access to, but I could see that villages, even next to these coal mines, did not have access to electricity. So just all of this was just very surprising to me because I'd never had that exposure. It was just a beautiful journey across India to Delhi. But then had friends, had lovely people supporting us and backing us up. Met Kapil Sibal, he was the technology minister, science and technology minister at that point. We took that message, gave him a request. He did a bit of a ride with us also. That got a little bit of a media attention. So got some media coverage in Delhi, but essentially, yeah, we really had no one. There was just, and we had no money, to be honest. We did that ride with really just a few thousand rupees. But it was just given with passion and a lot of hope and looking for answers. And after that ride, I went around the country speaking to some experts from Prayas and CSE and all of these folks who were talking, who were energy experts and made this film by New Coal. And Ekta, being a film director, she took it to Copenhagen at the COP, filmed it there. And the next thing from there was set up ONG Solar.
Fascinating. Can you tell me a little bit about, like, this is an off question perhaps, but like the logistics of all this? Like, do you just ride for like 200 kilometers, 100 kilometers on average, and then sleep, and then next day another 100? Like, what about safety? And like, I'm just curious about whole logistics of your ride. Back then, I will talk about the current one as well.
So that was a very, very basic ride. It was just the two of us. We had all our luggage behind us. There was no one as accompanying us. There was no one we had to meet. There was no agenda. We didn't even know where we will sleep, what we will do. We rode as much as we wanted to. We were fairly unfit. There was no training. So it was just started with 80, 100 kilometers, and then we stretched it later to 150. So we finished 1,800 kilometers in about roughly 18 days. We took a few rest days in the middle. And yeah, we were brash. We didn't care about safety. We were riding on pretty nasty roads in UP on these highways, which are not as good as they are now, with these trucks not having care for cycles. But it was good fun. It was just, it was a lot of fun. It was very simple and basic. It was a little different this time around. There was a little agenda. There was agenda prepared.
Let me ask you about the ride, the current one. So I would say the youth passion ride of 2008 was really great. But let's talk about, you also have, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you also have grown as an entrepreneur, right? You have seen projects on the ground, you've installed solar panels, you've worked on organic farming, etc., etc. So now with all that academic training, but also, entrepreneurial understanding, when you went to this ride, like, was your message more sophisticated? Were you seeking more sophisticated answers? Tell us, like, in detail about what your like key points were when you were talking to the different groups. But before that, just tell us what this ride was all about. and then explain the mission and the vision of this ride.
And also talk about, we set up ONergy Solar, but that was not it. We went on to set up another organic company, as you mentioned. So essentially, all of this was driven by the passion to create opportunities for the underserved. And of course, environment sustainability, climate action. So these two were really what was driving us, because they're also connected as well. And in 15 years, we ended up doing a lot of fun stuff, from setting up multiple companies to setting up networks. And then I came back at SwitchON about 3-4 years back from doing all of this, and started to do projects, and really understood that ecosystems have to be created for all of these things to take off, because these ecosystems don't exist. And that's what we started to focus on. But so two things started to happen in my mind and in the mind of my team at SwitchON. Was one, we were in 2023, we would be celebrating 15 years of SwitchON. We wanted to do something fun, but also didn't want to just do a big show, and I wanted to really reconnect with the community. You know, in the leadership, it ends up becoming very administrative. So I wanted to reconnect with the community, and it's been on my list to do go back cycling, and all sort of started to connect into this ride. And while we were thinking about this ride, what came out very clearly was that, and we knew that, and all of us know that climate change and the kind of action that is required, we are nowhere even close to doing that. And as a civilization, we don't have a choice. And that sort of started to inspire us to think about the idea of building this movement. And in some ways, actually, that movement exists in bits and pieces. So build this movement and connect to this global movement that exists. And we didn't want to take a message of gloom and doom, but inspire people to make a change, and also bring out stories of some good things that are happening, some great things that are happening on the ground, celebrate that, and also inspire people to take climate action. So it started, and what we said was, let's move for Earth, to build this movement, to celebrate and inspire climate action. And there, the idea and the way it came together was, I would be riding across states in East India in 2023, this year, where I would go from city to city, town to town, village to village, and there would be groups of people we would meet and connect with them. Again, not with the idea of just talking and having an adda on climate change, but go and do some purposeful events, stuff that we were already doing as an organization. Either they could be trainings or trainings with youth on solar technology, where they could build a future, or it could be farmer-based trainings on growing of millets, which were a climate resilient crop, or doing buyer-seller meets of farmers who were doing organic agriculture. So even purposeful events where they see they're able to connect and see their livelihoods or their health connected to climate change. And there is such a strong connection. These can't be looked in isolation, because climate change is happening. And I mean, more than anyone else, the farmers and the youth who are going to be most affected. And they are most connected, and most, of course, as humans, we are most very conscious about the life of our children, as young people, their future and their careers, and as a farmer, how they can ensure they can feed their families. So that is what we started to talk about. We were already doing that, but in our different work at SwitchON, but really put it all together, and through the ride, sort of bring that enthusiasm and really inspire people to not just look at this as an issue that is there and it'll happen sometime in the future, but it is now, and we need to do something about it now. So that's what it was. It was a lot of fun doing it in 2 states, in Bengal, Odisha. But we know this is not it. It will happen. These rides will happen in more states eventually, and it just doesn't end at the ride in these states. As a movement, it has to continue. The conversation, the dialogue, action will continue. We will continue to work with the people we have connected with through the ride, and also more people that we will continue to connect with. Yeah, it is a lot of fun.
Okay, but I really want you to go a bit deeper and tell us about like a conversation, right? whether you trust a student group or a woman group, any examples of like, I'm just wondering, like, do they understand climate change or and to what degree, and like what are their thoughts, what are their ambitions of addressing this problem? Like, give us some details of, any example from either Bengal or Odisha that you can think of from your current ride.
So I was very, very surprised that even in the most remote communities, these are tribal communities, I mean, accessing those communities is not easy. For them to get access to information, knowledge is of course easy on internet, but just closest of towns are hours away. Even they were very, very conscious about environment change because they're the ones who are at the front line. They know it's not been raining in these area for 4 months now. And they're the ones who can see it. They understand the problem of water. They understand the problem of soil losing fertility. They understand plastics creating pollution. Their water is getting polluted. Cars polluting. They were very, very conscious and they were all aware that their environment around was changing. Climate change, global warming is also something that people had heard about. They also knew solutions. All of them knew solutions around it. So that was incredible to see. And this happened everywhere. There was no exception in either of the states in any place I went to. The only change was the folks in these villages were, especially kids, were shy to talk about it, whereas in towns and cities they would talk about it. But that for me was surprising. And there were just very inspiring stories of and conversations of young people walking up to me and saying, what you're doing is very inspiring. You want to do something. And I've gone to them and they've reached out to me with friend requests and they're wearing the Move For a t-shirt and they probably had a selfie with me and put it out there. But what was more important was how they were truly moved. Some of them were truly moved that, a lot of people in these villages were truly moved that, someone has come from outside. I was an outsider, of course, and they've come from outside, but into our villages and to talk about this and talk about our futures. Some people, it really meant I could feel that in many conversations. But there was one particular conversation and there was a last date, ironically, in Bolangir in Odisha, where there was a big farmer meeting that we had. It was a farmer jury, and I was walking up to my cycle, and there were these two ladies, two ladies or women sitting next to my cycle, and this lady steps up and says, "I would like a photo with you." I said, "Of course." And after the photo, she says to me that I want to show it to my son and tell her that he cycled on the way, talking about environment. And it meant so much to me that this ride was really for the youth, for children, for farmers, and especially women farmers. And if it meant so much to these people, and especially the way she said it, and she added on saying that I'm going to not just take it to my child. And I started talking to her and she said, I'm going to go and talk to other communities in my village, other groups in my village, other SHG group members, and talk about what are the messages you're talking about and why you're doing this ride. And at the end of that conversation, like even if it didn't mean anything to anyone, but if it just meant something to her and to her child, this ride is a success to me. But it was just not that. It was just, I know there were a lot of people who moved. And I know also from 15 years of talking to a lot of young people, we have been able to inspire people and they've come to us or we've heard from others. So that needs to happen in today's time in building this movement. And I know this ride was just a drop in the ocean, but it was just very inspiring for me to see so many people know so much about climate change and ready to take action, and also to be able to see that it meant so much to people. It was just very humbling experience.
I have to ask you one question, and I'm just zooming out from, your specific ride to more of a philosophical theory of change question. So, is Vinay's theory of change to go and inspire people so they start taking climate action? Now, one thing I just want to point out is like, I'm just wondering, and, as a friend, I'm asking, I mean, these are poor people in villages, in towns, and especially in Eastern India, their personal per capita emissions are probably the lowest in the country even, right? So is it fair for a Vinay to go and ask, and this is again like a theoretical question, to go and ask them to take a climate action. Even currently, their emissions are not much, right? It's not that like they are some big industrialist or some, So is it fair for them to sacrifice anything if for the sake of climate action? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, how you think about this larger process.
I mean, absolutely, Sandeep. It's a very fair question to ask. And I don't want them to take any action for cities or country or for anything. I just want them to take action to secure their future. This ride was not about taking climate action for to save humanity, to save life on Earth or whatever. They have themselves to save, and they're fighting to put food on the table. And I know this so well because I want to take you back to another conversation I had ironically in Pulangi in 2010, where I was sitting with farmers, or not 2010, around 2012. When I was sitting with farmers, I went there talking about use of solar energy, etc. And I was living at a headman's house, and they were very kind to host me. Very simple. It was a hut, actually, not even a house. It was just a hut. And we were sitting on the floor. As we were start the meal, he says to me, he looks at me and says, "This is what we work so hard for." And it moved me like I can't even tell you, because food was something I didn't care about. It was just and I would be so disrespectful to it in many ways that I would say, "Kaisa khana hai? The food's not nice." But just that it meant so much to me. Just being able to see their lives and their struggles in such close quarter. And I've seen that in the last 15 years. So I know what that means. So it was not me coming as a city boy from 2008, but it was with that full understanding the struggles and what climate change is actually would do to them. So it was not about them doing anything for the world, but for their futures, for what are they going to do if there is going to be no water in 3 years' time because of the way groundwater is depleting, the way diesel prices are growing is going, and the way how are they going to run their pumps, the diesel pumps, that how are they going to irrigate their fields? Because I was already seeing farmers were getting off agriculture because they were just not able to afford diesel anymore. And farmers coming to me and saying, we don't want our children to get into agriculture. So I've seen all of this, and it was in how climate change could just massively impact their future, the health of their children in urban pockets and in rural communities. There were other challenges and issues. So it was really about that future. I mean, that's why we changed the right name from the first ride in 2008 was called Climate Ride. And we said, we don't want to call this a climate ride. After a lot of deliberation, actually, we said Move for Earth. It was not about the climate, but it was about people and their future. And because climate is so connected, because everything that we do is so interlinked with the natural world and nature, and we can't keep that away from that discourse and conversation.
When I have one more question in the same larger context. So if say I am somebody from a village and I met you and I'm really inspired by your ride, what are few things you would like me to do? Right now because you're someone who connects at the grassroots. Say I come from an agriculture family, I'm not very rich. Like what are some actions? Are the actions more personal that, maybe install solar, etc.? Or is the action like go and talk to your politician, push them to move away from coal or whatever? Like, is it more of a political side you're talking about, or is it like an individual or a combination of both?
At least this ride was all about at a personal level, what they could do. It was again very region specific. So, for example, we were in Purulia and West Bengal, which is a tribal community, green-fed agriculture. We were talking about millets there and how farmers should look at millets. If we were looking at urban town and we were talking to young people, so it was about waste, and waste was a problem. Or in Durgapur, it was industries and how industrial pollution. And so it was very specific to that locality, and knowing, and we had done that study, what is the problem where and what are the issues of that community. Of course, many issues were common, but what is it that they can do as young people or as farmers, or what is it that they can do to ensure that, like I said, how their health could be how they can protect themselves from pollution, or they could protect themselves from depleting water tables or rising oil prices, or just the soil getting the soil strength the way we are currently doing agriculture. So it was those kind of messages. And of course, we connected with a lot of, we had ministers or MLAs, MPs, not ministers, but MLAs, MPs join us at different points of the ride. Government officers join us by different points of the ride. We had events. Every day we had 3 events. So we had administration come in. So they were very much part of that conversation. And the way we have looked at our work is that it's not about demanding government must give us this or do this. It's how can we work with government, because we do recognize government has a lot of schemes and people don't know how to access it. Government doesn't know how to get it to people. And we want to play that bridge. So it was really about how do we come together and recognize the problem, the solutions exist. We know it has to be done. And because we worked on the building ecosystems for these solutions to scale, how can we do that? That's really how we approach this.
So I really like you have a very positive personality and a very positive message throughout the ride, and you're trying to take everybody together. But I'm sure you encountered some challenges, right? I'm sure you encountered some accusations, some challenges, and like, okay, all this is good, but what about this immediate problem that we are facing today? Like, how do you deal with all that?
There was no major incident that really happened. I mean, I've had major incidents in the past where we've gone to people and said, buy solar, take solar. We've taken these solar LED lights and they'd be like, this is nonsense. Do you use this at home? Why are you bringing it to us? I've had that in the past. This time it was different, and I didn't really have this because I had team members. Well, they didn't join me at the ride, but I had team members at different events who were organizing events with our partners, with local communities. And there was a lot of enthusiasm actually that had built in that, there's someone coming on a cycle into our village. It was a very, very, very positive environment wherever I went. People were extremely warm, kind in receiving me, no matter how much I said that, I don't want any reception, but you know how Indian hospitality is. And so I actually, it was the reverse. I didn't find anyone coming to me with anything negative. It was just a lot of love that I got, and that was exactly why it was so humbling.
So now let's talk about where we go from here, right? You've inspired people. You started as a youthful person trying to inspire in 2008. Now you've inspired more people, and not just through this ride, but kind of through all your work and, like working on renewable energy or organic farming and etc. Like, how do we scale this up? How do we make it so big that our politicians or the powers to be can't ignore, and this becomes like a mainstream agenda? I mean, this is not just an India challenge. This is a challenge of, like, people have a Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? Like, I love climate action as long as I don't have to sacrifice anything. And this is especially true for some people who, like you described, are just earning to eat, right? So they have different priorities. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just wanting you to speculate, or if you have any thoughts about how do we really make this like a big movement in India?
So here, I think, Sandeep, for me, this was a very personal journey also. I mean, personal journey because and I do understand that this needs to happen and more people need to know and more people need to come forward. Now, how do we make this really big is, I think when people start to recognize that their future is at stake and even at their current moment, they're being impacted and affected, that is when people start taking action. And it's already happening. And people already know solutions. It's just, and I don't know when we will come to that tipping point where this becomes this massive new movement. And I'm so inspired by the freedom movement. And I don't know what was that tipping point where all of India just sort of rose up and said, enough is enough. We're not just gonna sit here. We're going to give up on our daily lives and whatever we're doing, and we're just going to fight for independence. So, and I don't know when we will get there with this, but that needs to happen. And then with me, the way I have looked at if I look back and reflect back on last 15 years, I've always believed that there have to be companies who need to the change has to be market driven. And that's where we started building companies, social enterprises, working on environment challenges. We understood that just setting them up is not enough. You have to have ecosystems. You have to have bankers and all these stakeholders from government, bankers, skilled youth, everyone coming together for these companies to be able to scale and replicate their work, to then realizing that you're creating all of this material of training, etc. How can it reach more people? So creating networks, and from there realizing that we've done some of this, we've had our learnings, but a movement is what is required, and someone has to go out there and just start this. And I'm not saying that I'm the only one who's doing it. There are a lot of people, in fact, who are doing way more. I'm still in a nice, cushy home. I have a nice job to go back to, lovely family and everything. But people have left everything for environment or climate change and even other issues that they so deeply believe in. And I'm nowhere close to that. But all of these actions will start counting, and we will come to some tipping point at some point where people just come forward and start doing something about this.
Kevin, I have one last question. This has been a really great conversation. So after this journey, I don't know if you have had any time to reflect, but what are the new initiatives you're going to do in the next very, very immediate term, like next to 1 or 2 years? And like, did you learn anything that you think, okay, this is the issue? Like maybe from 2008, your key issue emerged as solar, right? So you started working on solar, but was there any like a very specific issue or couple issues that emerged from these rides?
So one, there's no silver bullet, as you know. With climate action, there's going to be a combination of issues, and I'm so inspired by all of this. And of course, we're not working on everything, but we work on a bunch of things with our focus on energy, water, agriculture, nexus, and our focus on clean air and sustainable cities. So there's a bunch of things that we work on already. For me personally, over the last year and a half, I've told myself that I'm going to move away from my day-to-day operational role at SwitchON to hand it over to build a leadership in the organization and hand over that to the organization. Well, of course, keep leading SwitchON, but not really look at day-to-day operations. So I can take out more time for initiatives like what I did with Move for Earth, and I want to continue doing such rides in different parts of India, wherever we are already working, so that there's continuity that we can maintain. It's not just a one-off ride that happens and there's media coverage and the enthusiasm and it dies out, but it continues. So I've not thought through what I will be doing, but I'm extremely committed that I want to make SwitchON independent and build it as a strong voice in the global community to bring forward issues from the ground, because we're so connected, and also have the brains and the intelligence that we can also connect with global leaders. And so bring SwitchON to that level where strong leadership can take it forward and partner with organizations, because that's what it really needs. We need people to come together. We can't work in silos. So that is my immediate term that I want to work on. And from there, just I follow my heart and do whatever comes my way. So yeah, currently I'm definitely very, very inspired to continue riding. I want to, yeah, I do it for myself, for all the fun that I have. It's just connect with the community, and it's just so great and inspiring.
Okay, one final question. How do you stay physically fit to do these rides, right? So, man, I'm sure like 3,000 kilometers, even if over like 10 days or 15 days or whatever number of days. I know that even in Kolkata, when we went to common appointments and all, you were riding in the middle of heat and all. So tell us like what do you do just to keep yourself fit on a lighter note?
I mean, for me, to be honest, this is actually climate change or anything. And I didn't talk about this earlier, but since you bring it up, it's actually a spiritual crisis. I mean, we are so absorbed by our own needs, and as a race, we're getting so self-centered to meet our wants and our desires. We're losing connect with the natural world. All of this is a spiritual journey for me, to understand myself, to know people around me. And all of that, I started to understand and appreciate how it is important to stay fit, because if I'm not healthy and fit, I will not be able to continue doing this path. And I started to really enjoy endurance sport, started to run, started to cycle, because again, I was able to connect spirituality in the sense that you were able to challenge yourself and then recognize that nothing, there are no limits. It's all in the mind. So, and I started to connect that with climate change and the work I was doing. So I've been doing that for a while now, for a few years. And believe it or not, I used to be 113 kilos 4 years back because I was just so engulfed by work and I thought this is my life and everything. And then I got unwell and then I realized that no, I mean, it's nothing if I can't be healthy. I can do nothing if I can't be healthy. So there was a change in lifestyle I made. And then, of course, the spiritual practice of Vipassana is what I follow. So all of this all is connected with the spiritual journey in many ways. So I really enjoy this and find it great to push my body, push my mind, push me to the limits, because this is where we are as a human race, that we are really being pushed. And there is belief, because I face that in my rides, that when I pushed, I am able to achieve and I am able to extend myself. And I know when we are pushed as a human race, we will be able to come back together with humility, with compassion and respect, and be able to find solutions to the problems we face.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Vinay. This has been such an interesting and inspiring recording. I really enjoyed talking to you and also knowing you for a few years now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Sandeep. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the India Energy Hour. Subscribe to this channel to never miss an update. To drop us a feedback, visit our website or write to us at theindiaenergyhour@gmail.com. We are on Twitter. You can follow at TIEH_podcast and get in touch with the two hosts at Shreya_Jai and at Sandeep Pai with a double I.